wanted to start with a little bit more about virtue ethics from where we were last night. I said a little bit about virtue, but I want to say some more. Virtues are usually thought of as a skill or a disposition to behave in a certain way in the right circumstances. A disposition is like being spring-loaded. You can be spring-loaded, but until somebody pulls the trigger, you're not going to act. You can have a disposition to act in a certain way, but until the circumstances are right, you're not going to act. So a virtue is a disposition to act when the circumstances are appropriate. But the virtues are not necessarily all or nothing sorts of affairs. Aristotle said that a virtue, or most of the virtues, should be thought of as a mean between two vices. So we have a distribution like that. Let's say that we're looking at the virtue of courage. And that would be the mean, that would be the virtue. Then we have a vice of deficiency. What would be the vice of deficiency associated with courage? Cowardice, sure. But then there's also on the other side a vice of excess. What's the vice of excess associated with courage? I'm sorry? Foolhardiness. Or some other synonym for that. Or take the vice of benevolence. I mean the virtue of benevolence. What would be the vice of deficiency associated with benevolence? Selfishness, stinginess, greed. And the vice of excess? Gullibility, credulity, giving away too much to the wrong people. So you see how this kind of works. Now, he did say, Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas, who's really developed this in the Middle Ages, and contemporary Christian ethicists who developed this, there are some virtues that don't fit this model. For example, faithfulness. Faithfulness is just a spike. You can't be too faithful. I mean, you either are or you aren't. There's no virtue of being too faithful to your wife. But many of them have this model. But there's a bit more to it than that. I stuck around last night for a while talking to Eric, and as we were leaving, walking out into the parking lot, we were accosted by the La Mirada ninja gang, all dressed in black, and they pulled out their nunchucks and they said, "Your money or your life." And I didn't know what Eric was going to do, but I took out my wallet, I threw it that way, and I ran this way. Now, for me, that was courageous. I didn't stand there and pee in my pants. I did something. I tried to discern. Now, I turned around and looked, and Eric, I didn't realize it until this happened, he's got 5 black belts in various martial arts. And he just did one of those, roundhouse kicks, and he took out the entire gang. You believe it? Well, anyway. So I thought that was pretty impressive.
Good job, Eric.
And that was courageous for him. Now, if he had run when he was able to confront the evil, that would have been cowardly for him. So suppose I walk out there tonight alone, and there's again the notorious La Mirada ninjas. And I say, well, I saw what Eric did, so I try the same thing. And I pull a groin muscle and fall on the ground and get beat to a pulp. That's foolhardy, because I don't have those skills. The point is, you've got to hear this correctly. The point is, virtues are to some degree person relative. This is not to say that morality is relative, but the actions of a virtuous person will be relative to the background knowledge and the skills and the context of the person. So there's a range here of courageous actions, and exactly what is courageous is relative to the person in the context with that person's background knowledge and skills and so on. I think this is a great insight. I actually at one point preached a sermon that I regret on Rahab. I was preaching a series through Joshua, and I said, well, Rahab's lie was wrong. God apparently forgave her, but she should not have lied. She was wrong. That was wrong for her. Just as the Hebrew midwives in Exodus, who lied and said, well, our Hebrew women are so strong they just give babies before the midwives get there, so we can't kill the babies. That was a lie, and I condemned that. My thinking has changed as I've thought more about this, and I think what I would say today is that for Rahab, that was a virtuous action. Telling the searchers, well, the guy's left. Or for the Hebrew midwives, telling Pharaoh's men, oh, the babies are born before we get there. Given their context, what they knew, their background, that was virtuous for them. For someone else, it might have been cowardly. We've heard stories about people in Nazi Germany or in Holland, Corrie ten Boom kind of situation where the Nazis show up and they say, where are the Jews? And some people will lie. And they might reason this way. The request that the Nazis are making is obviously an immoral request. And they're serving an illegitimate government, therefore they have forfeited the right to be told the truth. So it's okay for me to lie. And I'll say, we don't have any Jews here. Someone else with a much greater faith in God might say, they're in the closet under the stairs. And the Nazis come in and look everywhere except in the closet under the stairs because their faith in God has been rewarded and God has worked. I don't think I'm in a position to say that the one as opposed to the other is absolutely right, absolutely wrong. I think they both are exhibiting virtuous action given their own background, their own degree of faith, their own context, and so on. So there is some flexibility built into the concept of the virtues. I think that's a strength. And I think we see this in the way Jesus treats people. He expects more of some than he does of others. He says to the rich young ruler, go and sell all that you have and give it to the poor and come and follow me. But he didn't say that to anyone else. He treated each person individually. Now, when we transfer this then to environmental ethics, we have the same considerations that apply. What may be virtuous for one person may not be for someone else. We're fortunate here in this, I don't know if it's all of California or just this region, where recycling is governmentally mandated. I think that's a California state mandate, isn't it? Anybody know for sure?
Cities are required to recycle.
Cities are required to recycle.
The goal is 50% of their.
Okay, so we all get, when we sign up for trash pickup, we get the 3 bins, right? Green recycling, clean recycling, and ordinary trash. There are a lot of places where they don't have that. Now, it seems to me that if we think, well, it's all things considered, it's virtuous to separate your trash, to recycle. But if a person is in a place where they don't have recycling, where they don't have very many resources, where they're poor, they don't have the ability to collect and lug a bag of cans down to the recycling machine at the local Vons or whatever would be there. For them to try to cut back or to use disposable rather than recyclable, that might be virtuous for them. I don't know if any of you drove here in a Prius. I imagine many of us couldn't afford to buy a Prius, assuming for the sake of argument that that's a virtuous thing to do, because but if you can't afford it, I think a virtue ethics approach in environmental ethics says, given your situation, your resources, your own degree of knowledge, your own progress in spiritual maturity as it pertains to creation care, what you do may be different than what someone else does, and they both may be virtuous with respect to the environment. Does that make sense to you? I think it's a very freeing, a very liberating thing. We don't all have to live like Ed Begley does. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? The actor who's got this horribly strict environmental approach to living. I've never seen his show. It's on cable, I think. We don't have to live that kind of a strict Spartan life. And if you have kids, you're in a different position than if you're single or if your kids are grown. It's what is virtuous for you to do in environmental ethics is what Jesus would do if he were you in your situation, with your knowledge, with your background. And it may not match someone else. We'll talk a bit more about this tomorrow, but I wanted to make this point about virtue tonight at the beginning, okay? Any questions about that? Let's start out with this situation. We have imagine San Francisco and a trolley car. And you're on the trolley car riding down the hill, and you look ahead down at the bottom of the hill, and you notice that there's 5 kindergarten, first grade children laying down with their ears pressed against the rail. And you infer that their teacher has been teaching them about how the Native Americans used to listen for the iron horse coming. Just at that moment, the brakeman has a heart attack and dies. And you know that this trolley is going to barrel down the hill and kill all 5 of these children. But you also know that there's a siding. And you can jump up and pull the lever and divert the trolley onto the siding and save the lives of the 5 children. How many of you do it? Everybody. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, on the siding, there's a railroad worker. And you know that by diverting the trolley, you're going to kill the railroad worker, but you're going to save the lives of the 5 children. How many of you are going to do it now? You pray first. How many of you are going to still do it now?
Is there a third option?
Not here. Now, I think most people's intuition is the utilitarian calculus, the consequences, weigh heavily. Railroad workers, they seem to accept a certain level of personal risk by taking that kind of a job, and it's better to save 5. Furthermore, the death of this guy is foreseen but unintended. You know he's going to die, but it's not your intent to kill him. Okay? So most people would say what you do is divert the train. Some people would still say, and I can't argue with them, that I'm just going to keep on praying and do nothing and let God take care of it. Others are going to say we have responsibilities to act when it's possible. God expects that of us. Now, yes?
It's the same with the children, and death is foreseen but unintended if you choose not to divert the problem.
Yeah, it would be foreseen but unintended. But let's do this. The track loops. And you know that if you don't do anything, the trolley's going to run over the 5 children, kill all of them, come around the loop, and kill the railroad worker. So you got 6 deaths. If you divert the train, it turns out this guy's a fat man. And you know, now for these thought experiments, don't ask me how you know, but you know that there's sufficient biomass here to stop the trolley. So you can divert it, kill the fat man, and you know that that will be enough stuff under the wheels to stop the trolley to save the kids. Now, how do you do it?
Sure, it's going to die anyway.
The person that came up with this thought experiment and all these variations, Judith Jarvis Thompson, who teaches at MIT, says, no, you don't. Because now the death of the railroad worker is intended. It is the means by which you are trying to save their lives. And it's wrong to use an intended death to accomplish good. Now, some people may still disagree with that and may still say 5 versus 1 outcome. Thompson wants to say the difference between foreseen but unintended and intended makes a significant difference. By the way, this is called the law of double effect. This has been very well written and explored by Catholic moral philosophers, especially as it relates to abortion. As you know, Catholic policy is very anti-abortion uniformly. But in the case of an ectopic pregnancy, where the embryo doesn't implant in the uterus, but somewhere in the fallopian tubes or somewhere ectopically, if left alone, that's going to result in the death both of the mother and the child. And so Catholic moral philosophers say by the law of double effect, an abortion is okay there, because your intent is not to kill the child, it's to save the life of the mother. It's foreseen that the child will die, but it's unintended. Whereas in the case of a normal abortion, exactly what you're doing is intending to kill the fetus. So you see how this difference between being foreseen but unintended versus being intended may make a moral difference. Now, some of you still wanted to say, that's okay, I'm gonna divert it anyway, and I'm gonna use a fat man to save these 5. Some of you still wanted to say that, right? Let's change the scenario a little bit. The fat man's not on the trolley, nor are you. You're both on a bridge. And you see the trolley has run away. You see the brakeman has died. You see the 5 kids on the track. And you know there's only one way to stop it: push this guy off the bridge.
Not fair.
Now, those of you that wanted to kill the fat man by pulling the lever and diverting him onto the siding, are you going to push the guy off the bridge? What we're doing with these kinds of thought experiences is trying to pump moral intuitions. In my view, the result of this shows that apart from virtue, utilitarianism or consequentialism is unable to give you good answers. Well, we go from this then to the Bernard Williams example of the 5 Indians. And here are the differences between killing, intending to kill versus letting die. Then we got another example. Let's suppose that you're on vacation going up the Northern California, Oregon coast, and you come to a place where there are these wonderful tidal caves. So you got this big cave here. And the only time you can get in there is at low tide. At high tide, it fills up with water. And so they make you go down with a guide who's supposed to keep careful watch of the time. So you've done that, and you're down here in your cave, and you notice that the ground is starting to get wet and the water's rising. It's ankle high, and the guide says, okay, it's time to go. Now, the guide, unfortunately, is a fat man, and he's been eating Snickers the whole time, and he gets stuck. And you push, and you pull, and you twist, and he is absolutely stuck. You just cannot get him out of the opening. And the water is rising. Now, one of the members of your tour is a Boy Scout. And the Boy Scouts are always prepared. He has his Boy Scout backpack with him, in which he has a stick of dynamite. So the question is, do you put the stick of dynamite here and blow up the fat man to get out of the cave? How many of you say, use the dynamite? Nobody wants to commit to that. Would it make a difference if he said, it's my fault? I shouldn't have eaten all those Snickers bars. It's my fault. Do it. I have no family. I have nothing to live for. Would you do it then? That might tip the scales. But if he's saying, I can hear you, please don't do that. Don't do that. And of course, you know that if you don't, you'll die. The guy who came up with this is a Canadian philosopher, Kai Nielsen. And he says, of course you do. Now you'll have nightmares the rest of your life, but at least you can be thankful that the kid had dynamite and not just a Boy Scout knife. And this is Kai Nielsen's response. My own view is that's not a virtuous thing to do. I wouldn't take the life of this guy. I would face death myself. But I'm not sure I can make everybody else come to that same conclusion. No, there's no way out. I know, I see you trying to find a way out, but ex hypothesis, okay, now we go one more step. You were skiing over the weekend and blew out a knee. And so you're in the hospital, lying there waiting for knee surgery. And you're scheduled for 6 a.m. knee surgery. What you didn't know is that across the hall, there's 5 patients, each of whom is critically ill. This one needs a heart transplant, these 2 kidneys, this one lungs, this one what, stomach, liver, okay? And it just so happens that they are an exact tissue match to you. And you overhear a physician saying, we have the perfect solution. Yeah, I mean, a blown out knee is not terminal, but isn't it better that 5 should live than 1? The greatest good for the greatest number? How many of you are going to think that's okay? I hope nobody. You better ask your doctor before you go in for knee surgery. But isn't this the same situation as the trolley situation? No? It's not, because it would be the same as a second trolley situation. Here, the death of this patient is the means by which you save these lives, and intending a death in order to achieve some other result just seems wrong. It seems wrong on a deontological, moral system where you say our duty is to preserve life. We have a duty not to take innocent life. And I think it's certainly wrong on a virtue ethic. But a couple of these others, I admit, are somewhat murky. How you actually work this out depends an awful lot on how you've thought about it, what kind of developed moral theory you have come up with and you've committed yourself to live by. But the result, I think, of these sorts of thought experiments is consequentialist ethics. Utilitarianism, greatest good for the greatest number, is inadequate because for these kinds of moral dilemmas, it cannot give you a good answer. It might tell you to violate your duty, it might tell you to violate your virtuous character, and that just seems wrong. A moral theory that's acceptable should not lead to that.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.